Hi everybody. That's right, after almost a full year, we're back. And I have a new model to show you. This is a very anticipated model for me, which is the number 10 Konica Minolta Cadillac, the winner of the 2019 24 Hours of Daytona. And it's run by the Wayne Taylor Racing team. And obviously one of the very exciting things about this car recently is the driver lineup includes Fernando Alonso. A lot of you know him as a Formula One driver. And of course, he's been making little exploratory forays into other motorsports. And obviously, probably everyone knows that he was racing in the Indy 500. But he's also doing endurance racing in these awesome top-tier prototypes, including running at the actual 24 Hours of Le Mans and winning that as well. But I've been following the number 10 Konica Minolta car since before it was even a Cadillac, which it is now, which of course means it still runs the V8 engine that's not unlike a Corvette. And this model has extremely good detail, as you can see. It doesn't have any opening body panels, but I did actually shine a flashlight into the cockpit here, and you can see lots of detail for the little dashboard and the steering wheel, the seat, and so on. Also notice that a lot of these decals are metallic. So this one here on the nose, there's some little touches of the neon blue kind of color on the sides here, and of course right across the top and right back here. The thing that's fun to watch endurance racing, some of the things that differ from, say, if you're watching Formula One, and indeed Fernando as a driver probably noticed certain differences between what he's used to in F1 versus the game in racing an endurance car. Obviously, to some extent, fuel management almost comes into play more often. I think the tires actually last multiple stints, and yet they still give excellent grip, so I don't notice the driving style having to account for any weird nuances about the way the tires perform in terms of whether they tend to overheat and so on, and the degradation. So what comes into play a lot in endurance racing, because it's multiple classes of cars racing at the same time, is just traffic management. And so between traffic management and a little bit of fuel management, which might just mean you get, 1 or 2 extra laps without having to refuel, it can mean a big difference. The fewer trips you have to drive at pit lane speed limit, the better. And the small amount of time you lose by doing just a tiny bit of lifting and coasting, or, if you see the onboard of Fernando Alonso's driving, he seems unbelievably good at deciding where the best places are to save a little bit of fuel, in combination with accounting for when he's actually going to manage to find good passing spots for the slower cars, versus when he can know that he's saved a certain amount of fuel on the previous lap or the previous few corners. So then when he knows he's got a good chance to overtake, he can just plant his foot down. But the thing I find really exciting is watching how that plays into corners, because a lot of the time I know he still uses the brakes, but it doesn't sound like he is very much. You start lifting off the throttle sooner than your normal braking point would be, but then it almost feels like you just kind of throw in some downshifts with a little bit of braking, and you're flinging the car into the corner and trying to carry more speed, and kind of let the corner and the scrubbing that happens when you're cornering take some of the speed off the car. And it just means that corner entries in particular seem much more aggressive. So really exciting. Basically I can watch a full, 20-minute stint of Alonso's onboards, either at Daytona or at Le Mans, and just, it's delightful every second to watch how he does this, how he does that, and obviously the sound of this engine is just a big giant roar, so it never gets boring, at least not to me. I think watching onboards of Fernando has also, it certainly gave me a better feel for the potential of how exciting it can be to watch racing that uses a certain component of fuel savings as just kind of a normal way to kind of optimize your lap time versus minimizing the number of trips to the pit lane. Because initially I always knew there was a certain reality of that, but I never noticed it being so prominent before. Obviously the push lately has been to make cars more efficient and use less fuel, and so the regulation limits often push that, give you a limited amount of fuel to use up and so on, or they limit the fuel flow, and the idea of that seemed a little counter to what the whole point of racing is, which is just to go as fast as you possibly can. But it still can be a skill to try and figure out, like recent versions of the game Gran Turismo even built in some challenges that had to do with, okay, well, you have to complete a certain race within a minimum amount of time, but the idea was to try and go as fast as you can while just using up and not running out of the fuel you're allotted. So there's little things you have to do, like limiting your top speed, or obviously, lifting off earlier for the corner entry than you normally would, and then just brake later to try and make up some of that. And of course, if you know traffic is going to be a problem, then you have to time your acceleration so that you're not wasting fuel and ending up right on their bumper and having to back off again, because that's just a waste. So anyway, it was kind of amusing to try and, I kept repeating that challenge to try and see if I could still go right to the edge of using up the fuel right at the end of the race, but finishing the race as fast as possible. So, it's tricky. So, but yeah, it was quite fun. And honestly, in my real life car, I may not have mentioned, since I haven't uploaded in a while, but the last time I did a video about my actual car was with the Nissan Sentra, which unfortunately in April of this year I had to trade that in and get a new car because it was reaching 100,000 miles and was 11 years old. And unfortunately in today's cars, a lot of times, especially if you've spent the life of the car having some fun with, having a spirited driving style, as you might say. The previous year, I had already spent many thousands of dollars in repairs. A lot of that was just certain components, because now cars give you so many more functions and features. Things like tire pressure monitors, those sensors inside the wheel run on a battery that eventually does wear out, and the whole sensor basically has to be replaced, and those are not cheap. And I had all of them, and a couple other sensors that do different things than tire pressure kind of started to go out, and you start popping $300 here, $300 there, $300 again, and a few other things that were just time to be replaced. And then of course tires, which I go through every 2 years. And I buy performance tires, so they're not cheap. And then to go through a full year of that, thinking, okay, well now I've done all that needs to be done and this car will run again for a while, get a couple more years at least. And then I found out there were some repairs that had to be done just to make the car pass safety inspection, and it was going to be several $1,000s more, and I just said, that's enough. Can't do it. So, and because the Sentra is not what it was 10 years ago, I couldn't just buy another one. I wanted something like what I had, except, better, more horsepower, and some things like that. So I ended up trading it for one of these. I don't know if you can see that, actually. Let me see if I can hold it there. It's in the same color as this too, actually. But yeah, I traded in the Nissan for a Honda Civic Type R. Tonight I've been actually trying a bunch of different locations to see if I could make a new video about my new car, but sadly, for now, we'll just show you this little 1/64 model of it. But yeah, I got a 2019 Honda Civic Type R in Aegean blue. And when I saw this come up in my Amazon, I was like, oh yeah, I gotta have that. I've never bought a miniature version of my own car before. So, anyway. But what I really find exciting is that despite the fact that the car it actually has a smaller engine, but it's turbocharged, so it outputs 106 horsepower more than the Sentra did. And despite being wider and having much bigger tires, larger rims, and a body that obviously has some of these, like a splitter and a wing and all that sort of thing, the Civic still weighs the same as my Sentra did. So obviously, if it weighs the same and it's wider and it has more grip and it's got more horsepower, it's much faster. And yet, I don't go through fuel anymore than I used to, because the car has roughly the same fuel usage, really. But I mean, I only fill up the same frequency as before, and I put actually about a gallon less each time in the tank. So obviously I'm pretty pleased about that. Of course, it's always tough going back to having a car payment, but yeah. It's always nice, if you're gonna have a car payment, to be driving a car that every time you drive it, it reminds you why you're spending that money. So, and a lot of my friends who either have more expensive cars or know people who do, they're obviously always quick to say how it's nice to have a car that's fast but yet doesn't cost that much. You're not buying like $100,000 car or something, but it's as quick as a lot of them are. So anyway, so in that sense, I've come to appreciate forms of racing that take into account fuel and efficiency a lot more. I guess a lot more than they used to, and yet still produce cars that are super fast. So anyway, yeah, just a quick video kind of to let you know I haven't forgotten you all, and I'm so glad that everybody that keeps leaving me comments and saying, they can't wait to see me upload again. I really, really appreciate that, and it really encourages me. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little video and this beautiful model. So happy to have this in my collection now. And we will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.